think like the top seller at Ingram Spark.
And that's way more of a compelling argument to buy the book, honestly, like that you'll get a free audiobook and it has sex in it, than saying that it has great writing or best writing or like really anything at all about the content.
Right. We should do more marketing of there's an audiobook and there's sex in it. I feel like, yeah, that would...
We do have some crossover there.
Hi,
Right.
I'm Joe Beal, the founder and CEO of Microcosm Publishing. I'm also the author of A People's Guide to Publishing, which distills what I've learned from selling millions of books over the past 28 years.
I'm Elly Blue, the Vice President of Microcosm. We started this podcast to share what we've learned with newer publishers, so you can learn from our mistakes. Or maybe you just want to learn about the publishing industry.
This week, we welcome back Jane Friedman to answer another reader question, which is, how does a publisher get their first book out? And we get like a lot of variations on this question, which like I guess really tells you this is sort of the fundamental question of this podcast. Mm-hmm. People read A People's Guide to Publishing, and then they're like, but wait a minute, how do I get that first book out?
The devil's in the details, I think. Not least, like, are we talking about an author publisher? Are we talking about a new publishing company? And are we talking about books that are meant to go into the bookstore market, or are they meant to be sold direct to consumer? So that affects, the sort of answer you're going to get or what some of the best practices might be. I would say for an author publisher, which is the easier one to address, frankly, I actually try to tell authors not to put so much stock in launching or releasing that first book, because I hope that's not the only book you've got. It's like having a store with only one product. If you're pinning everything on that one single product, usually with anyone who's successful as an author publisher, they're planning a series. They're in a particular genre or category where there's an established readership, and you know what that readership is. So like romantasy, established readership, a lot of book talk activity around that. So probably your marketing and promotion push for those first titles or the first title would likely be influencer focused for book talk and adjacent social media like Instagram Reels. So I think the more industry focused launch, and let's assume a small publisher here, we have to start talking about, well, how many titles are you coming out with in a season? Are you going to have a catalog? Do you have a distributor? And usually all of those things are worked out before, you start marketing and promoting that very first title. So for example, I'll talk about it from the perspective of someone who covers the industry. When Publishers Weekly or some other trade outlet says, oh, hey, there's a new imprint. It's called, or a new publisher. Here's its name. Here's who started it. Here's their first season. First titles are going to start coming out in this month, in this year. They're distributed by so and so, and they're going to be doing 8 to 12 titles a year, and and so you kind of have the big picture of what's about to happen before the first book comes out. Obviously, that takes a lot of planning and you've already acquired authors and titles, and you've already got all of that information ready that you send off in a press release to Publishers Weekly or whomever it is. And so your first books that's part of the launch of not just the first book, but your publishing company and your program. And normally, that's also when you would start getting submissions from agents or others who realize, oh, there's this new publishing company and a new opportunity. At that point, you have, like, even though a small publisher might have a distributor, there could be really more of a focus on direct to consumer sales or selling direct. Again, it's going to depend on the category. So, and what your resources or assets are. So if you're doing a really niche book on woodworking and it's for people who are active woodworkers, that's going to be a very different launch for your first title or titles than something that's women's fiction that's really appropriate for book clubs, and you're hoping that you'll get some bookstore, library, retail placement or industry recognition, because those books really need some of that industry recognition to spread word of mouth, unless the authors themselves already have an established fan base. So that's a starting point. Maybe I'll pause there and see what advice you would give to these folks.
Yeah. Okay. First book. Well, it was. I was already publishing zines. I don't know. Does that count? And I decided to make a book because I was like, I know how to do this. I have some infrastructure. I was funding everything on Kickstarter. I had like a sales base. I had all the software, etc. My first zine, though, I mean, I really just like kind of figured it out. I had a great mentor in Joe, and I highly recommend mentorship to anyone starting out because there were so many things I never would have thought of. Joe introduced me to a designer who could do the cover. I funded it on Kickstarter, which was a very new platform then, so I didn't have to worry about paying for printing, which honestly I would not have been able to afford to print it without that. I raised $250, which was definitely about a lot more than I had in my bank account at the time. And I like kind of just got the word out in communities that I already was naturally an active part of that were interested in this subject matter, feminism and bicycling. So I was already sort of a vocal member of various listservs and social media groups and in-person groups, and that helped a lot. And then like Kickstarter helped get the word out too. So I guess it was like kind of I was more of an author publisher. I suppose I was the author of that first zine, but I also, I decided to call it Taking the Lane. And then on a whim, I was like #1. And I was like, that was me establishing this is going to be a list and a series of things that continued. So I really had just started to envision that, but I also kind of had to see that the zine would sell well before I was going to invest in making more. And I don't know. Yeah. Like if you're starting out with a bunch of resources, you have the capital, you're willing to make the gamble, then, and you know what you're doing, by all means, like I would say go bigger, make bigger plans. And like you can always have bigger plans and dreams, but also I do think like having kind of a conservative start where you aren't exceeding your own reach excessively is the safer way to do it.
Yeah, if you're an author publisher, I feel like the marketing and promotion or the launch plan should essentially be able to write itself because you're already involved in the community, like you said, Elly.
Mm-hmm.
There was a really successful author publisher that I interviewed maybe a year ago, Matthew Bounds, who, just did videos of him cooking, on Instagram Reels and TikTok. And so when he launched his first book, which was a collection of recipes, he wouldn't have had to come to you and ask, how do I launch this? It was obvious how he was going to launch it. He was going to tell the people who'd been following those recipes and enjoying them ever since he started. And I think sometimes authors get in their own way because they think they have to go do something more, proper or something that will get industry attention, like get into bookstores or get into libraries or whatever. And I mean, you can do that if you want, but it's usually a lot fewer sales and not very satisfying. At least if you're someone you already know the community that's going to be interested, just go to them first, and then success will eventually lead people to ask, how can I order this? How can I stock it?
Totally. And I think also like thinking that it has to be a book can sometimes be a little backwards. Like, does your thing have to be a book-shaped object? Like, can it be a zine? Can it be a series of posts on a fan fiction forum or a blog? Can it be a reenactment you do on TikTok? Can it be printed on a t-shirt? Like just having something that looks like a book is just such like a cultural icon or artifact that, it makes your grandma proud and it makes you feel like you're really doing things right because you're a published author, but that's not necessarily always the best way to get your ideas out there and reach your market at first. Like if you're going to invest the amount that you need to invest to make a book, like I would like build the infrastructure first to make sure that you have an audience for it. And that would go for publishers as well as authors, I think. I mean, I don't know. There's so much competition out there in publishing that like, yeah, and the deck is stacked. It's not an easy thing to get into.
Can I just say the thing that I find most annoying when a new publisher is launched, and this would also apply to new imprints at established publishers, and maybe I've already groused about this on this show is that they say they're going to publish the best writing or the best stories or the best literature.
Yeah.
I'm like, really? That's the best thing you
and then
got?
they published like a book of memes or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, we run in. I mean, we actually, one of my friends and I, we have a joke where we like text each other, publishers about pages, and then you're like trying to figure out if there's anywhere in there where they actually could be held to any of their promises, or like if any of the sentences actually mean anything. And because there was a time when I would look at pull those up and be like, okay, we need to rewrite ours, and then be like, I can't find any that actually say anything.
Yeah, it's bad. It's really bad out there.
But so don't worry about your about page. Work on why somebody cares about what you're publishing, and rather than claiming that it's the best that ever was, look at what they're getting out of it, and what's the emotional payoff, value proposition, etc.
Totally.
All right.
And how do they actually find and buy your book, which is missing from a lot of publishers' public presences as well.
That's a brutal one. Yeah. Right. Okay.
Just make it as easy as possible for people to buy your book. That's
the better way to put it. Yeah.
I can share a little case study of an author publisher who did things that I would have never counseled someone to do, but it worked for her. She was self-publishing her memoir. This is Ashley Renard. She wrote a memoir titled Swing. And there's a lot of sex in it. It has to do, with swingers. And the cover, also indicates what the content's going to be like. So it was really she had the benefit of it was the branding of the book, the branding she'd been doing up until the point she announced there was a book. Also sex sells. All of these things were very helpful to her in the launch, and I don't want to discount that part. But she decided to do a really aggressive pre-order campaign, the sort of pre-order campaign you would only normally see from a traditional publisher. And she partnered with a very specific independent bookstore to sell those pre-orders, the print copies. And then anyone who pre-ordered and showed her proof, and this is an old trick, I have to say, they would get a free audiobook edition that she had done. And she just used that offer to help create this virality around it, to get people to share it and say, oh, if you order this, you're going to get the free audiobook today. Obviously, that would be a hard launch to execute with a traditional publisher. She could do it because she was working independently.
Thanks for joining us once again.
Please send your questions to podcast@microcosmpublishing.com so we can answer them on future episodes.
And please give us 5 stars on iTunes and everywhere else that podcasts are reviewed.
You can find us on the internet at microcosm.pub,
on Twitter at microcosm,
on Facebook at Microcosm Publishing,
on Instagram at microcosm_pub,
and here in Portland, Oregon on North Williams Avenue.
Thank you so much.
Have a wonderful week.